To get some too. This is for sure. You saw this, right?
Mike, how you doing?
I got good.
Well, how are you today?
Welcome everybody to the March 5th, 2024 Tompkins County Legislature meeting. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can we have the roll call of members, please?
Susan Curry.
Here.
Deborah Dawson.
Here.
John.
Here.
Ann Corman.
Right here.
Here. Greg Mezzi.
Here.
Veronica Pillar. Lee Shirtliff.
Here.
Mike Sigler.
Here.
Shauna Black.
Here.
Travis Brooks.
Here.
Andy Brown.
Here.
Amanda Champion.
Here.
Dan Klein.
Here.
13 members present.
Okay, we have a quorum. Presentation of proclamations, petitions, communications, and notices. Looks like we have no red folders today. Okay. We will have an executive session, and I will announce the purpose later on. And that brings us to privilege of the floor. If there are any members of the public here that would like to speak, then please go ahead and fill out one of these blue forms. They're located in the back of the room. Fill it out, bring it up here, and you will get your 3 minutes. So we do have a few people signed up. Let me read the rules that you're agreeing to when you come here to speak. I agree to a 3-minute time limit. I agree not to raise my voice. I agree not to use lewd, obscene, profane, slanderous, or libelous language, or speak or act in a manner that would tend to incite a breach of the peace. I agree not to speak about county personnel matters. Personnel matters include comments about the job performance of named county employees other than elected officials. After 3 minutes, I agree to leave the microphone and yield the floor. Transferring time to another person is not permitted. I agree that if I cause a disruption and I'm asked to leave, I will leave the chambers. First person up is Susan Lustig.
Hi, good evening. I'm Susan Lustig, a resident of Tompkins County for over 45 years and an active real estate agent working with buyers and sellers since 1989. I have already begun to receive many phone calls about this year's preliminary tax assessments. Many of your constituents are unhappy and in many cases unable to keep up with the property tax burden in this county. However, that is not why I'm here tonight. This is simply to illustrate a symptom of a systemic problem that needs your urgent attention. In recent years, I have grown increasingly concerned about the Tompkins County Assessment Department's ability to provide accurate yearly full market value assessments of properties in the county so as to equitably distribute the tax burden. I'm here tonight to tell you that this short time frame is no longer feasible. The real estate market in the past 4 to 5 years has been dramatically different from any other market I have worked in. The ability to determine market value at any point in time has become more and more difficult due to rapid changes in consumer demand, coupled with less inventory for sale, compounded by a greater impact of emotional factors affecting value. While I commend the effort of the Tompkins County Assessment Department to do annual full market evaluation of properties, it is not possible to do within an annual time frame. It is my belief that an evaluation of value every 3 to 5 years would not only make it feasible, it would also make it more equitable. A longer time horizon reduces the impact of short-term fluctuations by providing more data points. In addition, by taking a closer look at how the assessment office does things, it will allow you to address a host of secondary issues that interface with property taxation that deserve your attention, which I would be happy to discuss with you at another time. Therefore, I would like to request that the Tompkins County Legislature establish a task force to examine and reevaluate how we can most equitably assess all properties in Tompkins County. Thank you for your time and for your service to the public.
Thank you. Next up, Zach Wynn.
Good evening. My name is Zach Wynn. I live here in the city. There was another overdose death recently at the Econo Lodge, where a man was found unresponsive, face down with some sort of pipe. This is the motel where people on Code Blue are placed to stay. Another recent incident, the hotel saw the clerk assaulted when someone came behind the counter. And the population responsible for these incidents will soon find themselves back on the streets and encouraged to settle themselves in the city of Ithaca's new, quote, exception zone, unquote. I visited this area today and will forward pictures I took. The large piles of trash I previously described have been removed, with a great deal of trash, syringes, debris, and Narcan, having been turned into the soil by Department of Public Works power equipment. These cleanups use backhoes and front-end loaders to collect and remove debris from the encampments. I do not fault the DPW, who are doing the best they can with scant resources, tasked with managing an issue that should not be their problem. While propane cylinders have been removed, the pollution remains. These sites need to be remediated in a more deliberate, hands-on manner that will undoubtedly cost more money. I suggest any new outreach worker positions funded by the county be tasked with site remediation as part of their job description. There is no infrastructure in the exception zone, no water, lights, and major issues with flooding. I would like to again reiterate my belief that the city plan to direct people to this area is irresponsible, dangerous, and doomed to failure. I would also like to remind the legislature of the letter signed by members of the Bangs Ambulance Bangs Ambulance and the Ithaca Police Department, warning of risks of the unsanctioned encampment, the new sanctioned encampment zone. People are dying in droves from contaminated drugs, and a social media post from an outreach worker has shown the encampment beneath the Buffalo Street Bridge in the West End on the Waterfront Trail is still present, with numerous shopping carts of trash visible to anyone using the trail. Harm reduction supplies provided by the county, provided by county-funded agencies litter all of the sites I have described. This approach is self-defeating and illogical, and I suggest critically examining any money budgeted towards outreach and harm reduction with a requirement for accounting of for funds spent on materials that will become debris in the encampments. There's a lot of people dying from drugs right now. It's on track to, break the record again. So I don't know what the solution is, but it seems like some sort of more immediate response would be warranted. So thank you, and I yield the remainder of my time.
Laurel Guy.
Hi, I'm Laurel Guy, and I am here to reinforce my colleague Susan Lustig. We are seeing just shock at the rising taxes, but my perspective is that this is a much larger issue. I'm going to give you that image of the frog in the water, where the water just keeps heating up until it's boiling, and that's where we're at. I think that we're considering this as normal, that we have high taxes in New York, and I understand the burden from Albany that's placed on the counties, hence the thing with the Medicaid that's probably going to raise our property taxes. They're estimating 7 to 14% because of that. And I read in there that the county executives were perhaps going to go to Albany. I don't know the update on that, but I feel that it's time for us to look at what we're doing with New York State taxes and why is it trickling down to the counties this way, and how can we fix this You know, maybe a junket to other states to see how we could do it. I also don't understand where all the money is going beyond just our property taxes. Where does the lottery money go? Is that going to education? Exactly how? Where's that gas tax going? Is that for the roads? Where is it helping us get a break in our taxes? And I know y'all are paying them too. So let's figure it out. Let's push back. What can I do? What can I do besides speak here? Tell me. I'll do it. Thank you.
Next up is Kyle Gebhardt.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kyle Gebhardt. I am a resident of the town of Ithaca in Tompkins County. I'm also here with my real estate colleagues. I come more or less from a real estate perspective today and more as a husband, a father, a baseball coach, my general roles in the community. We've all seen our tax assessments go up gradually. I know my personal tax assessment has almost doubled in the last 10 years. I've talked to friends, I've talked to neighbors, I've talked to clients, I've talked to future clients, past clients, and I think one of the hardships that we face is it's sort of the shell moving game, right? The tax levy is one shell. We have our personal tax assessments in the county as another shell, and then we actually have the actual tax rate, which makes up the taxes that property owners output from their own pockets. I would like to move that I think that we need a task force to see if we can do something to put a percentage monetary cap on the amount of money that can leave a given property owner's pocket to go into the tax world, because there's a lot of families in Tompkins County who can't take a 3% and 5% and 7% hike in their property taxes on an annual basis and make their budget. I think that we need legislation that would put those monetary tax increases on property owners and families in line with what employees' raises are on an annual basis at their job, at what the rate of inflation is. Because at the point where property taxes are going up 5% and 7% and 10% a year, the average family in the county does not have the financial means to cover that property tax increase, still put food on the table, pay the electric bill, and clothe their families. And I think as a community, we could find a way to maybe do something. I know that this is just talk. I maybe feel that maybe some people in this room might have a similar feeling that I have. But I do think if there was a way that we could put a cap on the monetary increase that property owners in the county endure on their taxes on an annual basis, it would help a lot of people, and I think it would help families be able to budget and be better off financially in the end. Thank you. I avoid the rest of my time.
Those are all the blue cards I have. Was there any other member of the public that wanted to speak? This would be your opportunity. Okay, well, thank you everybody for coming out to talk with us tonight. Next up is municipal official privilege of floor. We have Pierre S Perez, Common Council representative. Anywhere you'd like.
Hi. Yeah, I'll just go into it. So over the past month, the city has ratified a lot of stuff that was previously decided or anticipated per the last budget. Aside from that, the cost for a youth membership at the city golf course remains low. Thank you. Remains low. So if you want to pick up golfing and are under 18, consider that opportunity. Besides that, we have continued our policy of incentivizing transfers into the IPD. And coming up, and we've finished our appointments to boards and such, which is very exciting. Coming up in the immediate future, and this past weekend, we had a legislative retreat. It was actually quite successful. I feel pretty good about it, and we're moving into this next month's meetings with plans for, we're going to be going through the short-term rental legislation, which we should hopefully get passed soon. You can hit me with questions if you so desire.
Questions for Pierre? Greg?
Could you just briefly touch on maybe some of the high points of the short-term rental regulations you said you're about to pass?
It has not been presented to council yet. It's on the agenda to be presented.
Got it. So you're about to consider it?
Yes.
Okay.
Staff have been working on it. My understanding is that it is in a near complete state, but it has not been presented to us.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, can I follow up on that? Sure. Are you guys looking at the potential tax implications of the short-term rental policy? Do you know if it's just looking at procedurally what happens, or how a regulation would impact the occupancy tax that's collected, and then ultimately what organizations that are funded by that occupancy tax would then ultimately suffer, which are typically arts and cultural organizations within the county? I just think it's important that you guys keep that top of mind rather than just regulating property use. Also understand the full economic impact that a decision like that could potentially make on the broader community, not just in the city of Ithaca.
I can promise you that that is on my mind, and that my understanding is that, and again, it hasn't been presented yet, but my understanding is it's going to be very similar to the town's policy.
Which is, in my opinion, incredibly restrictive and doesn't help the situation. But that's a personal point of debate. So I hear what you're saying. I just hope you really give it a strong look from an economic standpoint and really understand what you guys are voting on and how that will impact some of the most vulnerable communities, potentially through loss of occupancy tax revenue, and what that could mean for some of those organizations that are beloved by a lot of Ithaca residents.
Shauna?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, I know that the county has been trying to work with the city on the cleanup of some of the encampment sites, and I wanted to see if that had been a conversation in your council.
So that has, to my memory, not been a conversation that council has had thus far. I'm going to be honest, I have had COVID this past month, so some of my memory this past month is fuzzy. I did go back through to make sure before coming here. To my memory, it hasn't come up.
Okay, thank you.
Veronica?
The rare opportunity for the members of a public body to meet all day like you had at your legislative retreat can be really cool and generative, and the downside for us is that the things don't get recorded and publicized. For instance, when the legislature had a group talking about the strategic plan, one of the things we learned was that some survey outcomes included that, for example, one of the biggest problem issues in our county was housing affordability, and one of the things that was going just the best was tourism and arts. That's just an example. My question is, when can we hear what came out of your legislature retreat, which I wasn't able to attend on Sunday?
So the results of the legislative retreat are still being typed up, right? It was a matter of days ago. My understanding is they are in the works, and if I'm remembering the plan correctly, we should be able to vote on something we generated in the retreat next month.
In April?
Yes.
Awesome, thanks.
To my memory, you can't hold me to that.
Mike Lane?
Welcome to our legislature, and thank you for coming and talking to us. Sorry you've been ill, but thank you for making the extra effort to come. I read that the city is the council is going to have 3 meetings a month.
Yes, that's part of our new work plan.
I think that's wonderful. I'd like to commend you folks on that, because you get to know each other better at meetings. I hope a lot of these are always going to be face-to-face. And you can get a lot done rather than wait for committees sometimes. So I just want to say that from my standpoint, I think that that's a great move.
Well, thank you.
Any other questions for Pierre? Well, again, thanks for coming.
It's always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Next up is legislator privilege of the floor. And I would like to include in this section, some of us had attended the New York State Association of Counties annual meeting and conference last week. And I had asked that those people who went say a few words about what they experienced there. So as part of our reports. So I got Shauna and then Lee.
Yeah, so I would first like to acknowledge the fact that we've seen an uptick in overdoses in Tompkins County over the past few weeks. And I know that many of us are kept aware of the overdoses we're seeing. And none of us take these deaths lightly. And the conversation that we've been having is what we can do to alert our community that there is a bad batch of drugs on the streets. How can we provide better public health services? How can we distribute Narcan more readily? What can our law enforcement do to help the situation on an already overburdened system? And so right now we're having these conversations. We're going to have some of the conversation in our Health and Human Services Committee meeting that's coming up in a few weeks. We're also going to have the conversation in the Board of Health. We're talking to providers locally. And I just want to let our community know that we're very sad for the loss of lives, and we're taking it seriously. We've always taken it seriously, but we also realize we need to look outside of the box, because obviously what we've been doing has not been working. So just wanted to update everyone on that. As far as a report from NYSAC, I am on the NYSAC Board of Directors, and we met Monday morning. And we did pass a few resolutions. No NYSAC conference would exist without us talking about the FMAP and all the money that is owed to us by the state of New York. And so we did pass a resolution asking for the overdue payments, the years of overdue payments, and to provide a full accounting of funds that are owed to counties in New York City. We did pass that in our committee, and that will be sent to the governor's office. We also talked about something called the HELP program, which essentially is set in place to help with civil service placement. There are some positions that we have, they're emergency positions that we desperately need to fill. And typically we've had to rely on civil service, which can take a very long time. The tests are very difficult. Sometimes they're only offered once a year. This allows municipalities to take some shortcuts, and again, it's for positions that we're desperately seeking, and so we're appealing to the governor's office to allow all local governments to be able to take some of these shortcuts to get much needed employees hired. So I do have those resolutions, and at some point I'm assuming we'll be perhaps passing these in committee as well, but wanted to let my colleagues know that that's the work that we did on the Board of Directors.
Thank you, Shauna. Lee.
Just a couple of things briefly. Shauna, thank you for those comments regarding the situation in the community. I was going to say something. I couldn't have said it any better than you just did. You all know that I carry one of these on me. It's joined to the hip, and I hear that activity going out, and I'm responding on some of those in a volunteer role, but probably more chillingly, I've engaged through the family business in some of these recent responses, and there is a problem, and I'm glad it's acknowledged and that there are committees working on it, because it is a very strong concern of the community. On a lighter note, the last Saturday was cabin fever in Groton, and our recreation director, who works with the various recreation commissions and has access to some of our county funding, was pleased to report to me Saturday night that they were back to pre-COVID attendance levels, several hundred people participating, and the one thing they didn't have was anything snow-related this year, but that may come back again in the future. One thing I did want to bring to the legislature's attention, the Village of Groton, it was announced Friday morning by the governor, has been awarded a $4.5 million New York Forward grant for revitalization of the downtown community. And it was one of 2 awards in the southern tier. The Village of Hammondsport was the other one. We've had a local committee, group of people, steering committee, that put together an application. The first time one went in, I was very surprised to see an award on the first application, but it speaks to the involvement and input from so many sectors of our community. And there will be a steering group that will work, and ultimately state agencies will be working with us to further award the subsets of that grant. But we're looking at renovations and facade changes to the buildings along the main corridor, investments in several of the businesses and enterprises, as well as recreational and other aspects along the Owasco Inlet. This is just exciting news. It's probably the best news that we've had in that community in 25 years since we were awarded funds to do the Main Street upgrades. But we couldn't be more excited and pleased about this, and it really is a shot in the arm to a community that could use that. So I told you when we applied for it, and I wanted to tell you that the village was successful, and I think you'll see a lot of community activity just getting this off the ground in the next year or so. Thank you.
Yeah, that is great news. Other legislators? Rich.
I was fortunate to be able to attend the New York State Association of Counties meeting as well. I am on the Public Safety Committee there, and we passed some resolutions. One in particular I'd mention is regarding probation. And I'll just read one of the clauses from the whereas. State funding for probation was drastically reduced between 1990 and 2015 from a 46.5% state share in 1990 to less than 10% in 2024. The funding has gone down, and the responsibilities that New York State has placed on county probation departments has only increased. And in fact, the role of a probation officer has become I would say more dangerous over time. And so we had a good discussion about that. I'm not sure we solved it, but we sent a resolution to New York State saying, I think this is something, or we said, we think this is something that really needs attention. We also talked about specialized secure detention. A few years ago, New York State passed Raise the Age legislation to make sure that 16 and 17-year-olds and even younger, if they commit a serious crime, are not held in a jail with older adults. And this is a really well-intended statute. Unfortunately, they set up a definition of what is specialized secure detention, where a youth can be held. And it's so restrictive, and there's so few beds in the state that there really isn't anywhere to keep these children. And we sort of recognize the frustration at the county level that we end up trying to deal with the problem that the state has created, and there hasn't been a state proposed solution in the years since Raise the Age has been passed. We talked about medically assisted treatment, going to the issue of the overdose deaths. When people are in state prison, they are fully funded for medically assisted treatment, which is a important way to address somebody who is suffering from substance use disorder. At the local county jail level, it's only partially funded, but it's exactly the same need for the exact same category of people, and we asked that be fully funded. Beyond that, we passed some other resolutions regarding various issues. I just mentioned, though, that I had a conversation with the state liaison, one of the NYSAC legislative aides, and he said there's over 24,000 bills proposed and pending in front of the legislature. And he said it's very difficult for NYSAC to even pay attention to how much legislation is percolating, and that most of those bills will never see the light of day. They don't get out of committee, but it's a way for legislators to show that they support various issues. However, 700 to 900 of those bills will probably be voted on and passed in the last 2 days of the session, and that most legislators never have a chance to read the bills that are actually under consideration or to understand what they're voting on, which I found deeply disappointing and troubling. But this isn't new information. It's just that this year the number of bills apparently has gone even higher than in the past. But on the positive side, I went to a session on emergency communications that talked about all the state work that's going on to build a backbone system to allow different counties, emergency services to communicate and to transfer calls across from one 911 center to another. That they particularly talked about a very large snowstorm in Buffalo, I think a year ago, where they were just snowed in, and the various 911 centers, the emergency dispatchers just had to stay there and work 24 hours a day. And they couldn't transfer calls to other 911 centers. And this would allow that to happen. So, for example, centers in Syracuse could start responding to calls and doing dispatch from there. That system is getting built, and it's a major undertaking, but it would be a dramatic improvement for public safety. And we're also heading towards what's called Next Gen 911, which is a far more complex system that does a much better job with these things that we all carry in terms of being able to locate exactly where people are, including, say, if they're on the 7th floor of a building. Right now, we don't, it's two-dimensional at best, that you can tell where somebody is on the earth, but you can't necessarily know elevation. And it's harder to do it by text and everything else. That's coming, and it was really encouraging to see that part of the state work. Anyway, I'll perhaps talk a little bit more at the public safety report. But
thank you. And Veronica, sorry. Yep.
Thank you. I also got to go to the NYSAC, New York State Association of Counties Conference, and we'll try to quickly report back some other things from there. Mostly from 3 of the breakout groups I went to. One of the sessions was about environmental advocacy, and I learned, one, that, actually, first thing I learned, it wasn't from that, I forgot something related. New York State did a very comprehensive climate impacts assessment recently, but I think it was work over a few years that had somehow slipped my notice, but you can find it at nysclimateimpacts.org, and what this is trying to use a bunch of research and modeling and data that we have so far to predict how climate change is going to affect New York State going forward. So it's about climate change, but it's also about everything, really, because it's going to whatever sector you're in. They've spread out the effects over 8 different sectors, spread it out over regions, have a bunch of case studies, and I have not delved through it yet, but just clicking around the website, again, nysclimateimpacts.org, and if you go to explore the assessment at the top, the demo I saw was pretty user-friendly, and I'm guessing it's not going to be fun info in there, but better to have the information than not, and so I'd encourage everyone to explore it. In the environmental advocacy breakout, I learned that the DEC, Department of Environmental Conservation, has a funding finder tool, and they're looking to expand it, but I just Googled DEC funding finder, and there's a little tool where you can search for grants based on what you're looking for. This is not just for counties, but whoever might be eligible for a DEC grant, which is not me personally, but I thought I'd put that out there. We also heard from Dawn Tim, who works in recycling and materials management, except I think they call it something else, in Niagara County, about the extended producer responsibility bill. We've talked about this in the legislature in the past. There's a new version this year. This is basically legislation that would shift the burden of dealing with single-use packaging, or like the packaging materials after they're used, shifting them back to the producers of the packaging as opposed to the end users and or the counties who have to manage the solid waste and in general pay for it, because recyclables are not worth a lot these days. So I know this will come up as part of a resolution we're looking at peak next week. But she sort of highlighted how much this is, like EPR would ultimately be a financial relief for counties, in as much as counties handle solid waste work. So if we could be doing less of that, if we put that back on the producers. And also that a lot of these producers are nationwide, and so they're gonna, what am I trying to say? 4 other states have already passed some form of EPR that's stronger than anything we have in New York, and the way she put it is that the states that don't have it start to share some of the costs a little bit as more and more states opt in, so we might as well be one of the ones that opts in. So that was that. I went to another breakout on cybersecurity and developing a continuity of operations plan. And the one thing I want to share, a lot of stuff for our like emergency response and preparedness, but just for anybody, the presenter said that 82% of cyber breaches can be attributed to human error. And he said, I quote, "Don't be an oops." So all that training our IT department tells us to do, we should pay attention. And then I went to a breakout on the state budget review, but other people have mentioned some things that come from that. And I went to one on building resilient communities, housing-wise, and there were some people there from the Greater Syracuse Land Bank, which I thought was really interesting. The land bank is its own entity that works with the government, in their case, both the city and the county, though they said the 29 land banks across New York State all do things differently. And they described their land bank as the default recipient of foreclosed properties, and then they sort of triage them, process them, and sell them to people who can live in them, if they're in the condition that that's okay. And they pointed out that this was the first time that they'd married their tax collection responsibility with neighborhood revitalization objectives. And I know we've talked very vaguely about, like, could we do something with that with our foreclosure properties? So I'm certainly not proposing that we do anything, but just saying that their land bank was interesting to learn about. And again, it sounds like models are different all over the place. And finally, this was not from a presentation, but just in the course of going to NYSAC, the presented materials of benefit, but also just the unscheduled time with, our colleagues, county employees from our county and other. And in chit-chatting with a few people from Tompkins and other counties who are staff, not elected, I got to hear some wonderful complaints about, in general, the state of government software and what they are made to deal with. And I know we as legislators, I guess we're the policymakers here, but we don't usually have to touch the software. We just get to sit and ask for the staff to do things and ask for data, and we don't get to interact with what I am told can be very terrible, frustrated, out-of-date things. This is no criticism to any of the staff. Plus, from what I hear, a lot of this, often this is state mandated, so not our fault. Again, I don't have a solution for that, but I just want to say I'm sorry. Thank you for dealing with this, and maybe, I guess we should just take it very seriously, I think, when the staff come and say, this software is not good and needs to be fixed, when we in the places where we do have an opportunity to help with that.
Thank you. Greg?
Yeah, I also had the opportunity to attend NYSAC, and two of the committees that I was able to sit on. One is a newly formed committee. They broke up one committee into two committees, and the piece that I was interested in, the economic development piece, got merged with the Ag and Rural Affairs Committee. So that was really interesting. I learned that there's estimated about 673,000 cows in New York State. Not my biggest takeaway, but fun fact. I had the opportunity to sit with the New York State Commissioner of Ag and Markets and hear the investments that they're making into the food system, putting a priority in Albany and making sure through executive order that 30% of food purchased by New York State is New York State food, with a goal to try to increase that number, throughout the years. And then also the work that they're doing with some Cornell connection and some other job training connection to look at a focus on youth ag jobs. As ag jobs continue to be in the more aging population, and farmers struggling to find sort of the next wave of who can help take that over, the investment that's taking place in job training and things like that. So that was really interesting to hear, and look forward to talking with Chris Bond locally on how we can support something to make sure that we're pointing youth in the direction of ag jobs, which are good jobs. Out of that discussion came a lot about high quality farmland that's being used for solar. I thought one of the most interesting and innovative suggestions that somebody made in the conference was the median in New York State throughways. Why not use that for solar arrays? Because it's just land that's sit there and it's maintained or not maintained depending on where it is. And there's over something like 5,000 acres of median just on I-90 alone. So it was really an interesting idea and a way to think differently rather than just using prime soils in already flat farmland that currently is at significant risk for the future of farming and a real insecurity in our food system. One of the other things, couple of resolutions that came out of the committees, which we actually have 3 on the agenda for housing and economic development, which meets tomorrow. But these resolutions maybe are in the feel-good resolution camp, which is a term we often use around here, but I'll call them advocacy resolutions, urging our state elected officials to really consider things. One is about reducing the cost of state mandated programs that they're pushing down to counties, which I think you heard some of our public commenters on, because it really is having a housing affordability crisis and contributing to the housing affordability crisis that we have. The other one being supporting a modernization of our sales tax to include the vacation rental and short-term rental industry. Currently, short-term rentals under New York state law don't pay sales tax the way that a hotel room would pay sales tax. So there's a push to create a more equitable system where there's opportunity for the state and local municipalities to be collecting sales tax. And the other thing that came out, and I just think it's something to note, as of February 11, 2024, there's new guidance for New York State businesses when charging an additional fee to consumers paying with a credit card. If anybody watching is interested in this, there's some great resources in the Department of State Consumer Protection. Businesses now have to list the highest advertised price, which includes a credit card fee. They can offer a cash discount, but they cannot assess an additional surcharge for paying with a credit card or some sort of service fee, transaction fee, all those type of things. That is illegal, but they need to advertise the highest price, including the credit card, and they can then advertise a cash discount, or they can, like many gas stations do, advertise both prices, right? If you pay with a credit card or you pay with cash. So I just think that was really interesting, and be curious to know, and I guess Lisa, I would maybe ask her if this, I know consumer protection in our county kind of falls under weights and measures in a way, but would be curious to know if, and I'm blanking on the name of the new person we just hired recently, maybe not so recently, but
Melissa.
Melissa, yes, thank you. If, if Melissa's
sorry.
here.
Heather, I'm
Heather.
sorry, Heather.
Heather, sorry, oops.
Hiring lately. Apologies, Heather.
She's going to resign tomorrow because.
No, just,
Melissa or Heather?
Heather, just
Both of them.
just how we're seeing, if we're seeing any of that or if we're getting any complaints within the county. Because I think it's something that we need to try really hard to make sure that we're keeping people honest and then also protecting consumers in the best way possible. Also sat through a really interesting Robert's Rules of Order seminar with Dan and I'm not sure others, but we were the two Robert's Rule geeks in the front row, soaking it all in. And I wrote down my favorite quote from it. Where is it? Don't make stuff up, look it up. Which is often something you hear with Robert's Rules. I'm guilty of it. If you don't fully understand it, I think we all are at some point. It's just a misunderstanding or past practice becomes this thing that we just keep churning out. So that was a really interesting, useful, and hopefully we can take more from that and apply it to our everyday here. But really a robust conference. It's often one of those that you kind of go into maybe kind of like, maybe there's not something here. But then you sit and you listen to the presentations and you get to interact with the people and there's always some really great takeaways. So if you haven't done it or haven't done it in a while, would highly recommend going to a NYSAC conference because I think there's always something to be learned from those. So thank you.
I'll just mention I was in one of those rooms with the commissioner of the Department of State, and he said about that new law about the credit card, he said that they have not developed the enforcement mechanism yet. So the law exists, but there's no enforcement mechanism yet.
Can I jump in on that? Greg, I don't understand. You look at the gas stations, the lower price is the card price than cash very often on the two things that are up. So.
Do you mean the loyalty card? You mean like a loyalty membership card?
Could be.
Oh, yeah.
But they don't advertise usually it just says card.
Yeah, I think my understanding based on the guidance that New York State put out is that typically when it says card, it means with a credit card, and then cash would be, or loyalty. I'm not sure. That's a good question to ask. That's one of those things where maybe it's deceptive and there's not enough clarity.
It's deceptive, all right.
And I think that's what this legislation is trying to protect against, right, is the consumer confusion. Because if we're sitting here confused about it, I'm sure there's plenty of other people that are. I know that there is the Attorney General. There are some complaint mechanisms right now on the Consumer Protection website. I don't know, Dan, like if it's fully fleshed out, but there are ways to file a complaint. What happens to that once it gets to Albany, not sure. But there are some mechanisms, but it's still like anything the state rolls out. Usually they roll out the change and then they come a few years later with the guidance on how to actually manage it.
And I was just remembering a little more. The commissioner said it's going to be enforced locally. It is our responsibility.
Oh.
They just haven't worked out the mechanism yet. Randy.
Thank you, Dan. Just want to report that the Tompkins County is going to have an agricultural summit put on by Agriculture and Farmland Protection Board and CCE on March 18th. And they're going to focus on things like climate and resiliency for farming. And there's going to be another thing focused on how to transfer land from one farmer to another farmer, whatever grants are available, and also farming conservation easements, basically buying development rights. So they'll be discussing grants. This is for farmers. So anybody that has a farmer's interest in those types of things, it is March 18th in the Enfield Community Center. And I think it's, and there's already 6 farmers signed up that are trying to figure out how to transfer their land. It's very, as we all know, land is extremely expensive here. And one of the things that this does is it buys the development rights so that the land can be transferred to other people at a lower cost that will continue to farm it, much to your comment. So wanted to share that. Also, I received 2 phone calls on assessments and was cornered in Wegmans and Tops, and not cornered, approached.
Too late.
But I'll first say that my assessment went up 30%. And it said right on there that my taxes were going to go up $1,400, and I realized Jay's not raising taxes. So but it's, when you get those kinds of surprises, it's really the issue. It's the surprise of getting hammered with 25, 30, 40%. One guy, 80% in 3 years. Because Lake Homes, boom, boom, boom. I mean, go 400, 600. I mean, it just jumps so fast. It's complicated. And I think that the county is a bargain. I mean, if you look at the actual tax that the county's been charging over the last 4 years, what we're collecting is fairly low as far as a rise. But school taxes are really where people get hammered, and it's out of control for a lot of people. One person was a senior, a real senior, a really great lady, and she's on fixed income. So what do you do? She's on retirement. When she retired from Cornell 20-some years ago, that seemed more money than it is now, what they're getting. Lives alone. It's a challenge for people when they get those big surprises. So I don't know the answer to that, but I'd like the idea of a task force. So thanks.
Rich?
Randy kind of stole my thunder. I wanted to make sure that the people who came and spoke were acknowledged, that we're hearing them, and I think everybody at this table has probably been approached. I had somebody stop in their car when I was out in the open, and we had a good conversation about taxes. It's a very complicated thing. I don't know if a task force is the right answer, but I think we do need to do something more and different than we've done so far to make it very clear that to the public what our views are about taxes, and to try to do some education, because there's lots of taxing districts. We as the county don't have control over the other taxing districts, and so you don't have a unified approach to this. You also have the whole issue of what is the levy? How much is in the checkbook that's been raised by taxes that governments are spending? And then the tax rate, which is really a mathematical calculation. And when somebody says, well, we're going to keep the rate the same, well, if the assessments have all gone up, it doesn't really matter. Your levy has gone up dramatically if your assessments have gone up dramatically. And so I think there's an education component here so that the public can really understand the different working parts of our tax system. Don't know how we do that, but I think given what people are saying to me, it's probably time. I don't know if anybody here says nobody's talked to them about their taxes, but yeah.
Mike Lane.
On the same thing, I appreciate the folks that came tonight to talk about assessment, but I think just in the comments we had tonight, clearly what we've talked about in government operations about the misunderstanding of tax rate and tax levy, and the role of assessments versus the actual taxing authority of the different municipalities. I think there's a general misunderstanding of that, and I don't know how we're going to solve it except to keep talking about it. The folks that are here tonight should be at the school boards. They should be at the city council. They should be at the village boards, the town boards, and they should be talking to their state representatives, because that's where the decisions on how much to be taxed are coming from. It's not right that our hardworking assessment department gets blamed for increases in taxes. It's not its fault. The price of houses has gone up dramatically. The gentrification of Ithaca is part of it. The realtors are part of it, because as the price of houses go up, their commissions go up. And I don't see in my practice and looking at those commissions, I haven't seen them go down all or even be on a sliding scale. So that's an industry, and that those things are all part of the problem. There's any way to cap the increases. The Governor Cuomo tried that with the tax cap for municipalities, but from the day one, there were carve-outs, there were ways around it, there are things that weren't included. It helped some, maybe particularly downstate, but it didn't solve the problem. So, and remember when the governor put the cap on, he put it on the levy. He didn't put it on the tax rate. And I think that's really important. So I appreciate those folks being here. I'm not sure a task force would be the way to solve this, unless it was simply a task force designed to help people understand the whole tax situation better. But as long as people are coming in from California and Atlanta and Boston and paying huge prices for our houses here because they think they're cheap, our assessments are going to have to go up, and I don't appreciate my assessments going up. I can't imagine anybody who does, but it's the fair way of doing it. And I sent around an article from Long Island about Nassau County, which had delayed any reassessment for 4 years. And people were being treated unequally, unfairly. There were two ways of, that county had 2 ways of actually answering the complaints. So the people who didn't complain weren't being treated the same as people who did complain. And we don't want that to happen. We don't want to have the big increase after 3 or 4 years. They'll like that even less. We went through that in 2009, I think it was. So I wanted to respond in that way.
Deborah?
Well, initially I had a question for Veronica, and then I'd like to kind of weigh in on this assessment issue, if I may. So I was really interested to hear your report on the EPR issue. That's been knocking around NYSAC since the first year that I went. And back then, EPR was very narrowly focused on particular types of packaging. Mattresses were one of the issues. And I'd be interested to know, has it broadened now to, single-use packaging across the board, for example?
I don't know exactly what it's broadened to, but even, maybe you can help, even last year, the bill, I should just promise to update you later.
Okay, that'd be
great. Last year, this legislature, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, passed a resolution advocating for the bill at the time, and I confess I haven't gone back and looked through like this, I guess it's the same legislature session, but this year's, whatever the current version is, but it listed a whole bunch of materials that would be part of it.
Okay.
But take that with a grain of salt.
Okay, well, I'll look forward to your resolution then.
Including packaging
Yeah.
is a big one, yeah.
Okay. So this assessment thing, actually, I'm one of those rare people who has not received a complaint from any of my constituents about assessments, but that's probably because I've been hiding.
Want some?
Do you want to just state your phone number real quick?
Yeah, this issue is quite puzzling, and I know GO has spent a fair amount of time evaluating whether we should continue as we have with 100% assessments on an annual basis. But I found Susan Lustig's comments enlightening tonight, simply because I think one thing that we might want to examine is whether or not over a period of, say, 3 years, the fluctuation in real estate prices might level out to because that's not something I really gave a lot of thought to. And I'm sure that we've all watched, just astounded at the fluctuations in real estate prices since the pandemic. I've personally never seen anything like this. So that's something that we ought to examine and consider, whether we ought to reconsider the annual assessment, certainly. And I realize the GO's already done this. But I think that the amount of public outcry that we're hearing, I'm not getting complaints from constituents, but I'm certainly seeing it on social media. It's a big, big topic on social media. I don't think it hurts to look at it. And I don't mean to in any way second guess or undermine the good work that our assessment department does, because I know Jay Franklin is the best little assessors in New York State, if not the country. But he is following a protocol that we, the legislature, have given him. So maybe that protocol needs to be re-examined. I don't know. I'm certainly not unwilling to have us look at it again in view of the outcry that we're getting and the input that we've gotten from our real estate agents. Thank you.
Amanda.
I haven't read it, but there's an article from yesterday at the Ithaca Voice. Ithaca City School District considers 3-year pause on tax rate increases. And just scanning it briefly, I think there's something along the lines of they think that the tax base will grow enough that would, right, yeah. So anyway, that's there.
People's taxes will still go up. It'll just be the assessments and not the rate. Yeah, exactly.
Greg?
Yeah, so I think when, Mike, full disclosure, I'm married to a realtor. Some of my best friends are realtors. I have nothing but respect for the work that they do. I don't necessarily think that high prices are because they're paid on a commission basis. I just don't think that's factual. I think they have a fiduciary responsibility to both the buyer and the seller to help them and navigate them through the process of buying a home. I think who is to blame is elected officials that hide behind tax base increases to grow their levy and then keep their rate flat or reduce their rate. And to Amanda's point, the Ithaca City School District saying we're going to keep the rate flat for 3 years. Well, thank you, but I just received a 40% increase, right, or a 30% increase on. So their tax base there is growing, and that's how they're growing the budget. And I think when it comes to misinformation, it's not uninformed public. I think our constituents are very informed. I think it's a lot of bait and switch and clever wordsmithing that takes place by elected officials who hide behind the growth in assessed value within the county. And unfortunately, we have a countywide assessment which falls under our purview, and that's for us to do something about. I know that the assessment department works very hard. I also thought Susan Lustig's points about, because it was interesting to hear her say and not really complain about taxes, but maybe we're asking the assessment department to do a job that's maybe unattainable, to reassess X number of properties every year at 100% and get it right? And to be equitable. So to have more data points in a volatile market could be very interesting to see what happens. I think just kind of throwing our hands up and saying, well, this is New York State, this is how we do it, this is how it's got to be, then we're just as bad as the ones that say, we're going to hold the rate flat. Don't worry, folks, we're not going to take a rate increase, but we're going to grow our budget by tens of millions of dollars a year. So I think we have a real responsibility. I would strongly advocate, I'll volunteer, where's the sign-up list, to be on a task force, because I think we have to do something, because we are pricing ourselves out of a sustainable community through our taxes. It starts with Albany, and we've got to bang down the doors of Albany and the governor and Representative Kellis and Senator Webb. It's an election year. Now's the time to go out to the public forums, to the rallies, to ask the tough questions, to hold them accountable, because there's a lot of things that we can pass in those resolutions in the last 2 days in Albany that then ultimately get kicked down to local municipalities to pay for. So if people aren't reading stuff before they're passing it, now's the time to hold your elected officials accountable. We have to do something as it relates to this, because it's getting out of hand, and because it's also a failure of our elected officials at the town and city and county level over the last several decades of not continuing to make aggressive improvements in infrastructure so that we could grow our housing, so that we could grow our tax base by population growth, not just through assessment growth. And so we've really failed to do that in any sort of meaningful way. And I think now's the time, because it's out of hand, and I think you're starting to really hear how bad it is, because while maybe somebody from California thinks it's cheap that they're buying a house here for what they're buying, the 40-year Tompkins County resident who's seen thousands of dollars of increases year over year in their assessment, it's not cheap. And those are the people we need to look out for. And if we're just going to sit back and do nothing, we're sending our county in the wrong direction.
Lee?
The letters haven't arrived in most of District 9 yet, but there is a lot of anxiety. And one thing that I have found helpful is to at least explain to my constituents that when we meet as a legislature at the budget retreat just a few weeks away, we set a goal based on a tax levy increase, and it's usually quite conservative, in 2%. And I think that one of the most helpful parts of the process is we do have an excellent public information program, and we do monitor what increases that we do from the minute we start the expanded budget committee process. And one of the things that's always helpful to me that I'm watching is to see what the tax increase or decrease, as the case may be, will be based on the median value of the houses or the single family homes. And so there is a monitoring process that occurs at this legislative level. And it's structured in a way so that we aren't taking advantage of the assessment increase through the goal process. So that's one thing I try to educate on. I don't know that other governments do that. And to Greg's point, it is that combined tax levy or the combined tax bill that when you factor all the municipalities together, that really is making it unsustainable in many of our communities.
Mike Sigler.
I'll be quick. I mean, I can't say anything better than Greg said about Ithaca School District saying we're going to freeze the rate. I mean, that newspaper headline I thought was rather misleading when they said that. I've been talking to Jay a lot this week actually about this issue, and just some things I don't have permission to actually share everything he said. Not that it's not, I mean, he didn't say anything, you know, that I wouldn't be able to share, but something he did share that I thought was interesting was, you know, while we did see almost 13,000 houses increase their tax, increase their assessment, another 18,274 saw their assessment go down. And you're just not, that surprised me too. You know, and you probably won't hear from those people because nobody said, hey, my assessment went down. It's always, but I do understand. I know people that had a $200,000 house and it went up to $400,000. I mean, that's like buying a whole other house. So I don't think, it's not that I don't think we need a task force. I just think we can handle this with the Housing and Economic, with your committee, frankly. We can do a subcommittee. on it. Well, while I would say maybe it could go through Joe, I really think it should go through you for the simple fact that one of the biggest parts of the problem is we're not building new housing, and that's economic development. And that we have a shortage of housing, and that's one of the largest explainers as to why our houses are going through the roof. So it's not, I'm not competing between the two. Hey, if you want to do a joint whatever, do a joint whatever, but that's clearly a main issue in our area, is just a lack of it. The one thing Jay also shared with me that I thought was interesting was there haven't been that many sales since the beginning of the year, but there have been some, and all of the houses have gone for more than they were assessed at. Not all, 2/3 went for more than they were assessed at. The ones that did not go for over their assessed price, there were issues that were not known about by the assessment department. And I thought that was interesting too, that, you know, just housing has gotten very expensive in our area, and that is going to hurt a lot of people, and that is something we need to address. But I think some people think that just everything has gone up, and then that's, if we just look at the numbers, that's not the case. So I look forward to either a subcommittee or a task force. So thank you.
Mike Lane.
Yeah, I normally wouldn't speak twice, but there was something I wanted to say, and that's to Lee. Lee, I think it's wonderful that Groton got the grant. And if you think about the history of these grants, the downtown revitalization grants, Tompkins County has never received one. The Ithaca has been passed over again and again for the $10 million prize. I'll call it a prize because it's a competition. And it was only been, 2-3 years that they've come up with the idea of the smaller grants that the smaller municipalities could try to get in for. Dryden's tried a couple of times, hasn't been successful. So it's a big thing for Groton to receive this grant, and congratulations. Thank you.
So we are technically still in legislative privilege of the floor. However, we did have a couple of staff people that went to the New York State Association of Conferences meeting, and I'd ask them also to share. So if, with your permission, I'm going to allow staff into the legislator time slot. Lisa, would you go first?
Oh, sure. I think excuse me, in addition to some of the topics that our legislators brought up, the one that was of particular interest to me and that Shauna mentioned was the HELP program. We had heard in my meeting with county administrators from the New York State Civil Service Local Government Division that that program allowing extended flexibility in civil service has been extended to counties as of February 14th. And this will allow the potential flexibility for many open competitive positions. So I asked about when this takes effect. The New York State Department of Civil Service has to provide the guidance to localities about how it's going to roll out. So we're waiting on that. I notified Ruby immediately. She hasn't heard anything, but that is going to be potentially very useful for us in recruiting and hiring. That's my main highlight.
Thank you, Lisa. We also had both our deputy county administrators attend. Norma Jane, you want to come up and say something?
I think I attended most of the same meetings as the legislators. I think the one that I didn't see others in was the airport economic meeting, and that was a really good conversation. It was led by the Broome County Airport director, and they were having conversations about just some of the ways that airports are looking for alternative methods of earning income for the airport. So some they were talking about offering courses, having some additional ways of utilizing the airport. So I've taken a bunch of notes. I'm going to share that with our airport director, but I think that was my big takeaway from that.
Thank you. Bridget Nugent.
It's like show and tell.
Thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak. This was my first opportunity to go to the NYSAC conference, so I learned a lot, much of what has already been stated. I would add that I attended a strategic operations planning session hosted by Livingston County, and I'm pleased to say that we are doing really great in our process. We learned about the best practices, and we're right on target with those best practices, so I really thank you all for being so engaged and involved in that process. More exciting for me is I learned how we can make sure that we're not just creating a plan and putting it on a shelf, that we're really making sure that we're implementing it and regularly reporting on the progress. So with our OpenGov tool, we have the opportunity to be regularly reporting to you all on where the county is in implementing the plan. So took a lot of good practices from that session. So thank you.
You know, we talked a lot about the assessment and the taxes end of it. We're also spending public money, and so that's why I asked people to report on this conference. We use public money to send people for this. For most of us, it's a once-a-year thing. I'm going to give my little report too, and the tone of my report from the NYSAC conference is a little bit different than other people's and different from what I've reported in the past. I was at a workshop that was about emergency response and some of the E911 and that kind of thing. And it was, the panelists were from either Dutchess County or Ulster County, and these are two counties that are next to each other, but with the Hudson River dividing it. And so, you know, if you think about that for a minute, the challenges about trying to do a rescue on the Hudson River, among other things, when you call that 911 center and they know where your phone is, if you're on the Hudson River, you're not standing still, you're drifting. So they have to keep track of that. And the Hudson River flows in two directions depending on the tide. So, you know, just a little extra layer of complexity. But back to the workshop. At one point, one of the presenters said, please raise your hand if you're a Republican. People raise their hand. Please raise your hand if you're a Democrat. People raise their hand. And you could feel the room get a little tense because we don't talk hardly at all of party politics at this conference. Most of the counties in New York State are Republican. It's something like, it's more than 2-to-1 Republican to Democrat. So most of the attendees at this conference are Republican. But like I said, you hear very little conversation about party politics. So at this workshop, when he said this, you know, it kind of caught everyone's attention. And he said, the reason I brought this up is because one of our counties is Republican and one is Democrat. And one of our emergency response department heads is Republican and one is Democrat. And we work really closely together. Party politics never comes into it. And furthermore, there's a whole package of stuff that's in front of this New York State Legislature right now. And we need you all to go and advocate for it, regardless of whether your representative is Republican or Democrat. And you know, there's this little saying that we sometimes say, I've said it, which is there's no Republican or Democratic way to plow snow. And you know, the same is true for emergency response. And that was the point this person was trying to make. And I just found it really refreshing because, as we know, on the national level, politics is extremely divided to the point where, you know, really our federal government's kind of frozen, can't really do anything. State government also very divided. But locally, that is really not the case. And that's what I observe from what I see at the NYSAC conference. I see a bunch of people like ourselves that are here to solve problems. Yes, politics arises now and then, but that's not why we're here. That's not that doesn't stop us from accomplishing things. We are here to solve problems. That's what I see at local governments all across the state. And that was an important thing for me to see and remember and to take home. End of sermon. We are going to move on unless there's any other legislative privilege of the floor. Okay. I do not have a chair's report. And then next up is special topics, topical presentations, and or discussions. And so you might remember that I've been asking, we're trying something new this year. We're having some of our agencies that we invest a lot of resources in to have a brief report about what's going on in those. And this month, this meeting, Randy Brown is up to talk about Cornell Cooperative Extension, Tompkins County. Randy, you're on.
Thank you, Dan. Cornell Crop Extension, there's actually one in every county in the state. There's an extension throughout the country, maybe not be called Cornell, but there's typically an extension everywhere. Cornell Crop Extension in Tompkins County has been growing. It's been getting a lot of different grants. The budget for 2024 is $9.6 million, which is a considerable jump of over $1.5 million from the prior year. A lot of that was from grant funding related to climate change initiatives and heat pumps and a lot of things like that. The payroll of Cornell Crop Extension is $6.7 million, so a lot of people employed there. About $2.3 million of that is covered by Cornell Crop Extension Administration. They manage and pay for all the benefits associated with that. There's 4 major entities or functioning groups. The 4-H and family, that's about $2.5 million of the total budget. There's a lot of programs, about 18 different programs within that group. There's an ag and horticulture, which is about $1 million of the total budget. Not nearly as many, but 6 different entities making up those. Environment and nutrition and health, that's $2.15 million. Part of that's that big grant that I just mentioned. And there's 9 different entities, groups doing things within that circle. And the last one is nutrition and health, which is only $370,000. Really hasn't been a program that's grown much in recent years. The county contributes about $974,000 of the total budget, but I'm reading there's also county contracts that are grant funded and whatnot, another $960,000. So the county is funding CC considerably, and they're doing a lot of very good things in my mind. A lot of new board members. There's 4-year terms are the max for anybody, and the board is full. They did a good job of recruiting board members this past year, and a lot of good people from all over the county involved in that. I think when I see people on these boards, they generally show up because they want to have an impact. If they don't have an impact, then they don't stay. So I think that has to do with anybody who's a volunteer of a board. You have to feel that you're making a contribution that means something. Otherwise, why spend your time there? But I think we have a good board. We have a new executive director, Cynthia Gattini, if I've said that correctly. She started in January. There's a long process that went through for that search. I was part of the tail end of that, and I think she was a great choice. And Meg Cole has retired, and she did a transition, which I think was really important. And I think she went around and met with people. I think they met with Lisa in their group already, and so that's good. They have a really strong system for tracking grants and how people are managing their time, and they have to enter in their timing for billing and how they're documenting to their funders what is being done. I think they can expand on that, but I think it's really a good move that the CC took for all the extensions throughout the state. They had different systems before, and they didn't communicate. They have a couple buildings down on Willow Ave. Back about 2018, I believe the county, maybe is different than that, gave a bond to CC because they had a roof collapse and different things that happened. And they fixed that, and there's solar panels that were part of the issue. All that's been fixed, but then they got a reimbursement from the insurance, which they've been doing more repairs with that money. And I think the total bond was $300,000 or something, and it's down to $260,000. But that's the only debt they have on their buildings, which is good. And they're actually looking at doing an assessment of the building because there are lots of problems that need to address so they can plan for doing actual repairs. There's a roofing issue, there's other things going on. It's a fairly old building, but it's a great spot for them. And they're doing exterior work too, so more things can happen for people outside there. I think there's a strong management core. I think the morale's really improved there. A lot of good things. I think that there's a lot of discussion as to how to communicate what Cornell Crop Extension is actually providing to the community, and they realize that a lot of people don't know all the things that they're doing, and that they're not reaching the group of people they should be reaching throughout the county. So I think there's a strong focus that I'm really excited about that. Communication is a big deal. That's about it. That's 3 minutes, I think, and any questions, I'd be glad to take them.
Thank you, Randy. Any questions for Randy? Mike Lane.
How's the 4-H program doing?
The 4-H program is doing very well. They're actually doing a lot of repairs to the 4-H camp, and we're continuing to do that. They're having their annual duck race, which is going to happen. They're doing a lot more things that had kind of gotten lost in the shuffle from COVID to raise some funds. There's a group of people who are trying to raise funds just for 4-H, and that's primarily focused on youth. I'm really impressed with the subgroup that has been formed for that. So.
Good to hear.
Any other questions or comments? I'll just mention something. I'm a big fan of Cooperative Extension. First of all, I worked there for 9 years, and then I still volunteer with them a little bit, and I was on the board for 1 year. And one of the things I really admire about Extension, and that's really valuable to us, to the county, is that they're very flexible. For an organization, they're very flexible. You can, some new program that not sure where to find a home, Cooperative Extension often can be that home. And they're very flexible with their terms of employment too. So they were constantly, somebody was half-time and they get some new grant and now that person's 3/4 time. They can mix and match a lot. Anyway, it's very I find it very valuable to the community that there's an organization like that that can take in orphan programs. All right, well, thank you very much, Randy. I'm going to move on to reports. Start with County Administrator Lisa Holmes.
Thank you, Dan. I gave my update about the NYSAC conference. That was really the only update I had for this for tonight. I do have Mona Smiley joining us from the Community Justice Center, and she was going to provide a brief update on activities of the CJC. So Mona is joining us via Zoom, and I think she's prepared to share screen.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me. It'll be very short presentation that we're up to over at the CJC. Let me know when you can see my screen.
We can see your screen. If you're able to lean into your microphone a little bit.
Yep, is that any better?
Much better, thank you very much.
Okay, sure, okay. So, just a little background or reminders, I guess I would say. The 3 things that the Community Justice Center exists to accomplish is to bridge the community and law enforcement, manage the implementation of the joint plans, and most importantly is to reduce the disproportionate minority contact with law enforcement and the negative impact from the criminal justice system. We've been empowered to develop some work plans and budget for plan implementation, the community and law enforcement around relevant issues. To facilitate some working groups that is going to work on those issues, make recommendations to both the legislature and common council, and then implement plans within its expertise. So that's what.
Want to see if she can stop her video?
Really briefly about the plan and the way we have the presentation set up for this evening, and we'll talk about the plan, the descriptions, some of the milestones that we've accomplished throughout the plans, and then what our next steps are in 2020 and beyond. So the first one I have up for you now is the innovative and inclusive recruitment and retention for law enforcement. And for that plan, the description was to develop a comprehensive, inclusive and innovative recruitment strategy for correction officers and law enforcement. Some of the milestones that we have been able to accomplish with that particular plan is we worked with a company, a strategy consultant, HCH Enterprises, who
Hey, Mona, excuse me for a second. Mona, you're breaking up a little bit, so there was a suggestion that if you turn your own video off, that'll might help with the amount of data.
Got it. Hold on, give me 1 second.
Sure, thank you.
Is that any better?
I mean, so far, every once in a while you were dropping out, but
Okay.
give it a shot. Thank you.
Go ahead. I took the headphones out also, so let's see if that helps us. So one of the major project milestones is that we worked with a strategy consultant, which was HCH, and they were able to deliver a document for us with some very specific details in recruitment and retention strategy, for the Tompkins County Sheriff's Office and IPD, and they were able to deliver that in Q1 of 2024, so I think we got it in January. The document has been published by the CJC and distributed to law enforcement and human resource departments. I also believe I sent it to County Ledge and to Common Council. Another milestone is that we were able to deliver a Tompkins County Sheriff's Office recruitment video, which was produced in-house in 2023 before the civil service exam. And that included law enforcement, public safety recruitment in Tompkins County and with the HR talent pool program. So for 2024 and beyond, we're looking at to begin implementing recommendations from the report that we received from our consultants in collaboration with our human resource from the county and the city, IPD, the Sheriff's Office, and that will also include advertising program implementation. So what that looks like is our working group will come back together and we're going to strategize on how we begin the implementation of some of the recommendations that were made. Where are we going to move here? The next plan is the community healing plan. We've been working on this one for quite a while, and so the plan was to develop a healing plan that would address trauma and relationships between residents of our community and law enforcement. Some of our project milestones are that we held a large community healing event last year. They had about 70 plus people. Featured trauma and healing expert who engaged the community in dialogue and facilitated healing and relationship development between the community and law enforcement. We did have a couple of law enforcement officers attend that community event also. We've had 4 community members that are trained healing facilitators and are working on developing structure for our healing events and spaces. And then our youth engagement and community engagement, fostering community healing through arts is the relationship with the Downtown Ithaca Alliance, the History Center, a local artist, and Southside Black Alchemist. That's the development of the mural over in Baby Bank Alley, which is, it's come a long way. It's not quite finished, but hopefully, not hopefully, but we're planning on a reveal in April, and that will be publicized and open to anyone that wants to attend. So for 2024 and beyond, what we're looking at is regular community conversations with impacted community members and law enforcement personnel. We will use our community healing trainers in conjunction with a couple of law enforcement officers from IPD that have committed to this project with us. We have some dates already established for the sessions that we're going to have this year. We're going to hold 6 of them by the end of the year. And then we'll also have additional youth engagement strategies, which will strengthen the relationship with law enforcement and deepening an understanding of trauma and justice here in our community. Officer Wellness is another plan that we've been working on. And this was to help develop a countywide program that would promote and support holistic officer wellness. The milestones that we've accomplished already with this group is that our working group was engaged. We did wellness surveys that were administered to law enforcement agencies and to the Department of Emergency Response. The results were presented to our working group, law enforcement, and community members. We also offered NILEAP peer training and post-critical incident wellness trainings. And we're working on implementing a train-the-trainer model for local peer programming here in the county. In 2024 and beyond, we're going to be working on implementation of an on-call counselor service for law enforcement, emergency responders, and their families. We're looking for contracting with a dietitian and a nutritionist who can provide some confidential one-on-one consultations with employees. and providing support for implementation of a peer support model that will be started here in the county. And those things that we're working on for 2024 and beyond are things that were identified from the results of our survey of law enforcement and the Department of Emergency Response on things that they need to, help them take care of themselves so they can better take care of our community. Alternative wraparound services. This was to look at other ways that we can implement an alternative to law enforcement, any type of response system for crisis intervention. So we talked about different services, human services that we could deliver. So some of the project milestones was the implementation of the 2 community resource hubs, one in Groton, one in Enfield, which offers 4 hours a week for community members to access resources. Another milestone is that we are moving to 5 community resource hubs this year. Lansing and Slade are on tap have those resources opened in April. City of Ithaca in the West End. We are working with hopefully West Village, reaching out to them and waiting to hear a response on whether or not their community room would be available to house a hub for a couple of hours a week. And then we also, a milestone we had was to develop the criteria for measuring the success of the pilot co-response team, which is the CARE team. In 24, now that we've gotten those things already established and accomplished, we're gonna further invest in the community resource hub model, possibly have expanded hub hours, ongoing programming evaluation across the alternative response programs, and just continue to help inform our community and set community expectations around response types beyond law enforcement. And that's a lot of the conversation that's happening at the 2 hubs that we have now. What other resources are they looking for that the CJC can out to them? It might not necessarily be a law enforcement response or connection to them. Culturally responsive training. It was designed for us to redesign and implement a culturally responsive training program that would incorporate de-escalation and mental health components into a comprehensive response for law enforcement. So in 2023, we made funding available for law enforcement trainings, and we identified a working group that is continuing to work on establishing a culturally responsive training curriculum that will be in effect and will be available for law enforcement, both Sheriff's Office and IPD on an annual basis. So in 2024 and beyond, we're going to facilitate and support the ongoing trainings for both law enforcement units. Let's see, the traffic stop enforcement results is the next one that we have. And the description for that was to collect and evaluate the results of officer-initiated traffic stop enforcement. Take a look at areas in Tompkins County where people are feeling unsafe, and it could be in relation to road conditions, to traffic, and then identifying calming or control measures. So some of the milestones for this one that we've accomplished is that we issued an RFP for consultants to examine our community input on unsafe traffic areas, and we have beginning conversations with IPD regarding available analyzing of their traffic stop data. So for 2024 and in the future, we're going to have ongoing community input systems that are going to collect information on what our community perceived as unsafe road areas and talk about ideas for solutions, and then we'll facilitate conversations and information sharing with traffic agencies. So we'll keep it local and see if we can't come up with some that address that. Maybe one of the last ones and probably one of the larger ones, it's our 9/11 dispatch and policing dashboard. The CJC was tasked with to develop and publish a dynamic crisis response and policing dashboard. There's lots of different ones out there now. We're still working on ours. Some of the things that we have been able to accomplish or consider a milestone is that we have engaged a working group that has invited and reviewed community input and ideas for data points. We've also developed a concept dashboard, which was presented to Public Safety Committee. We receive and analyze data from Dewar for the dashboard. So Matthew, who is our data analysis, is in constant contact with Daniel Schwartz from Dewar, and their information transferring and analyzing has been a really, really great relationship. So in 2024 and beyond, we're going to sustain and consistently updates to all the CJC dashboards. The CJC dashboard will also lead into or have links to every one of the dashboards that are out there now, IPDs, the sheriff's care team, and the district attorneys. So, and then we'll also have, we'll be able to do analysis of baseline data, and then communication trends with officials in the wider community. And that was really super quick, but that's what the CJC has been up to, the milestones and what we're looking forward to in 2024. Thank you.
Thank you, Mona. I think we might have some questions and comments here. Mike Sigler.
Hi, I just have two questions, actually. The Ithaca Voice was reporting that part of this, when it came to recruitment, was a pullback on some standards, and I didn't know what was behind that.
I mean, we have a working group for the innovative and inclusive retention. We had a working group that worked on it. I didn't necessarily see any pullbacks. We really reached out to law enforcement for their involvement and for them to participate, so we didn't have to go based off of national data. I'm going to be honest, we had very little. We did have some, but not a whole bunch of interaction or interviewing or participation with law enforcement. So the recruitment team that we had hired, the consultants, they really did what they could with the information that they received.
My other question was just this redesigned training. I went down to, so Broome was holding the school, and I went down and I saw an IPD, one of our I think one of our few recruits there for the IPD who just came on in the last 6 months or so. And it seemed like that was the school he went to, was this school in Broome that was put on by, I believe, the Sheriff's Department. So I didn't know how that redesigning training kind of goes into place. I mean, they go away, I think, for like 18 months, right, to a police training. So I guess I didn't know how that fits into all of that. Like
well,
how we...
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's it.
The training that we're referring to is culturally responsive training. So we're taking a look at all the trainings that IPD offers, all the trainings that are offered through the Sheriff's Department, and we're trying to come up with a curriculum that will address culturally responsiveness. So we'll join both the curriculums, but we'll also look at nationwide data to see what other police departments are providing. So some of it we don't want to repeat. We're not going to reinvent the wheel, but there may be other trainings out there that could address culturally biased issues that neither one of our police departments are using at this time. So that's what we're looking for.
Lisa, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, for clarification on that, I think you're speaking to the academy training itself, and so this would not be changes to the academy training, but ongoing.
Okay.
And then in relation to the report, which you all received a copy of, around recruitment and retention, I think there were not recommendations, but considerations that are in use by other law enforcement entities elsewhere in the state or country that could be considered in terms of standards for entry that, we can choose whether or not to implement. So I don't think that there was a strong recommendation that standards be lowered in any way, shape, or form.
Veronica.
Thanks.
Thank you. And thank you, Mona, for the dense report. I'm looking forward to the dashboard. 3 questions. One, I guess, about the culturally responsive training. You said there was money allocated for this in 2023. Was it spent?
No, it was not.
And was that because there wasn't a training for it to be spent on, or some other reason?
There was some money that was spent on verbal judo training that was hosted by the Tompkins County Sheriff's Department. All the money was not spent, and that's just because there was no curriculum established.
Okay, thank you. And I guess similar question for the, not about money, for the community healing facilitators that you said you have facilitators trained in structures for events and spaces. Since then, have there been any community healing events or spaces open? I don't know what the structures are. Or is that for the future?
IPD just joined us last week. We haven't had any law enforcement involvement in order to create the space, is what we call it, with them. So now that we have them on board, we have, like I said, 2 designated officers that will have committed to those times, and we just haven't narrowed down the space. So we'll have 6 of them. We'll have those 2 officers plus our 4 trainers that will hold that space. What we have decided within the working group is that it's a lot more intimate to have a smaller setting for them. Officers did share, the ones that were there with us for the larger group, did share, their level of comfort and some concerns that there was only 2 people. There was only 2 officers that showed up out of 70 people. And so we're just establishing what the ground rules are, how we're going to handle it in order to accommodate our community members and our law enforcement partners.
Awesome, thank you. It does sound like progress. And last question about the traffic stuff. What you described sounds like it's going beyond law enforcement and officer-initiated stops to thinking about traffic safety more broadly. So are you in the CJC also talking to other organizations like the Highway and Public Works Departments or the Transportation Council? Or
we actually we have a control group that will be meeting for the first time this Thursday, and it does have someone from the Department of Public Works, some people from our CJC advisory board, and then community members plus county and city representation that will be on that group, so we can bring them all in and begin the planning for that.
Awesome, thank you.
You're welcome. Rich.
Veronica just asked my question about traffic safety. It seemed like it was a little bit of a different approach. But you answered the question. But Mona, thank you for the presentation and all the work on this. This is helpful to know.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, Mona, thank you very much. Some way we're going to get a copy of what you presented so we can spend more time with it.
I do believe that it was sent over to Katrina earlier, so she should have it.
Katrina says yes. Thank you.
All right. You're welcome. Have a good night.
You too. Back to you, Lisa.
That concludes County Administration's report. Thanks.
Any questions or comments for Lisa? Next up, Acting County Attorney Holly Mosier.
Thank you. So I thought I would give a different type of report tonight. At the last meeting, I started thinking how I could come up with a report that might be more interesting and helpful to all of you, or even, the public listening. A lot of people ask me, what does a county attorney do? And my response is usually, where do I begin? Everything. So I thought I would give you basically 2 weeks in the life of a county attorney. I tried to keep track of everything that I worked on over the past 2 weeks since our last meeting, and this is what I came up with. So I've had meetings with, reviewed contracts or other documents for, conducted legal research for, and or provided legal interpretation, advice, or opinion to the following county departments: Highway, DOER, DSS, the Legislature, the airport, probation, district attorney's office, planning, administration, finance, HR, board of elections, the county clerk, assessment, and for whole health, I was able to work with public health, environmental health, and I represented mental health at 2 hearings. I attended 12 court appearances, worked on an appeal, and I worked with multiple law enforcement agencies, including IPD, Trumansburg, and Dryden, to gather and review discovery and evidence for some of my family court cases. So I hope that's helpful to you to...
Wow.
I don't need applause, but that's a pretty typical 2-week window of what I typically do. Keeps things interesting, and
That was an excellent report. I was just thinking of all those years of when we heard no report. Questions or comments for Holly? Ann?
Did you get to sleep or eat during any of the last 2 weeks?
Oh, yeah, no, like I said, that's a pretty typical 2 weeks. It was very manageable. Yeah, it's just what I do.
That is helpful for us, to have, even though I'm sure 2 weeks is not indicative of the whole year, but it sounds like it gives us a pretty good snapshot, so thank you.
Yeah, I think over the course of, any 2 weeks, like I said, that's pretty typical. Another 2 weeks, I might work with some different county departments, or have more court appearances or different types of court appearances, but I would say the past 2 weeks have been pretty typical.
Any other questions or comments? I will just mention that the application process and interviews for the permanent county attorney are coming along. We are going to review the applications this week, I think. Is that right? Yeah, this week. And the interviews hopefully this month. I think that will happen. So we're moving along, trying. All right, next up, Lori Scarrett, Director of Finance.
Thank you. I was asked to provide the sales tax report monthly going forward, so that is what I have for an update tonight, is the January sales tax information. I'll start with a few comments from the Comptroller's office, and that was that local sales tax collections across New York State for January increased by 0.3%, so relatively flat over the same month in 2023. The county and city collections outside of New York City totaled $910 million, or a decrease of negative 2.8%. Fewer than half, 27 of the 57 counties, experienced year-over-year increases. So with that, Comptroller DiNapoli suggests, with the overall growth having moderated over the course of 2023, local officials should remain cautious in their sales tax revenue projections for 2024. So with that, the results for Tompkins County for January, countywide for all municipalities, we received just over $6.3 million. 6.6 was last year, January, so we had a decrease of 4.55% countywide. The county's share of that mirrors the same numbers, so we received $3.5 million this year, 3.7 last year, decreased 4.55%. The towns and villages had a decrease of 1.69%, and the city of Ithaca decreased 7.59%. And that is what I have. Any
Questions or comments for Lori? Randy?
Yes, thank you, Lori. What's the budget for this year? Do you have, for the total year? Do you happen to know that? Next time, that's fine.
43.45 million.
Okay. Also, I was reading a couple articles about what's going on and why sales tax is down. One of the theories is that the cost of food, which is not taxable, has gone way up, and so people's income didn't match the cost of what they're paying for, and so they're spending a lot more money on food and things that
And
aren't
less
taxable.
on other things.
So it was interesting.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Lee?
Just a quick question. What was the number again for January? 3.6?
the county received, you mean?
Yes.
It was 3.564627.
3.54627. And I guess if you took 43.5 and divided by 12, we're slightly under budget. We should be about 3.62. Does that sound correct?
That sounds correct. I didn't do the math, but yes, that sounds correct.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Rich?
I certainly take the advice that we should be cautious in our projections on what sales tax is going to do this year, but January is typically not one of our high months, and in fact, November, December are some of our biggest months. So whether we make budget or not, I don't know that we can read very much yet, but we certainly have to pay attention to this, it looks like. Yeah.
Other questions or comments? I'll just throw in that gasoline tax is big. That's a big percentage of our sales tax. Gasoline prices are down, so that's another explanation. All right, we are moving on to the, resolutions added to, withdrawn from the agenda. All right, moving on to the consent agenda. For appointments, we have Mullen K., member, Human Rights Commission, and Njoku Awa, member, Human Rights Commission. For the Community Mental Health Services Board, we have Elena Zapf. For the Office for Aging Advisory Committee, we have Tobias. And for the Tompkins County Youth Services Board, we have Patricia Bushell and Brianna Foster. Resolution A, budget adjustment, grant acceptance, Department of Social Services, Safe Harbor Grant, ID number 12179. Resolution B.
Off, please.
Resolution B is pulled from the agenda. Resolution C, reappropriation of pretrial grant for benefit of the pretrial program of Tompkins County, ID 12240. Is there anybody that would move the consent agenda? Travis moves and seconds. Just let's have a vote. We can, we're all in the room. We can do a show of hands.
Woohoo!
Yes, I'm not used to that. All in favor of the consent agenda? Okay, that looks like it's unanimous. Thank you, everybody. All right, so it is 7:30. And we have the committee reports and one resolution. What is your preference, legislators?
Take a break.
Keep going. Keep going.
Let's get this over.
There are donuts, just saying.
There are donuts back there.
Putting that out there.
And cookies.
Keep it.
Okay, we're taking a 7-minute break.
How many cookies can Dan eat?
Donuts one.
7 3/4.
Donuts and
Donuts
cookies.
carry the day. Someone had to say cookies. as much as you want.
That is your favorite, please.
Yeah, it was great.
Thanks for jumping on that bandwagon with the assessment. It's crazy. I tell you, this woman is 83 years old.
Okay, let's get started again.
She's got a ranch, went up $80,000.
All right. So we're up to standing and special committee reports, and there'll be one resolution there. First up is Downtown Facilities Special Committee, Randy Brown, Chair.
Thanks again. We haven't met since our last meeting. Our next meeting is March 12th at 9 a.m. And we're going to be reviewing the timeline for the downtown Center of Government building separately, just kind of get an update on where we are with that. A resolution that we're going to take a second stab at regarding deconstruction of buildings. And then we're going to be reviewing requests for qualifications for architects and engineers. And I'm sure that'll be a good discussion as well.
Questions or comments for Randy? Thank you. Health and Human Services Committee, Shauna Black, Chair.
Thank you very much. We went through the department goals for 2024, and it was good for our committee, nice for our committee to hear what our departments are doing, provide a little bit of feedback. And one of the things that did come out in our conversation, we had some feedback on the Human Services Annex and brought forth the Center of Government and some thoughts. It seemed like there could be some concerns about accessibility and parking. And also there were some concerns about the presence being close currently, we're in location to Department of Social Services. And if they move to the Center of Government, they might lose some of that proximity. So Randy, thank goodness, is on Health and Human Services, and he promised he would take that to downtown facilities as some of the concerns. Let's see here, as far as what we did during the meeting also, I would like to thank the following members. Travis Brooks has offered to be on the Alcohol and Drug Council. Randy Brown is going to be on the Community Mental Health Services Board. Amanda Champion, the Health Planning Council. Office for the Aging, Dan Klein. Tompkins County Youth Services Board. That's me. Oh, sorry, that's Amanda Champion. Yeah. Sorry, Dan. Tompkins County Youth Services Board, Randy Brown. Human Rights Commission, Susan Curry. And Human Services Coalition is going to be myself. So, you know what? I think this was last year's list. Sorry. But I think it's pretty similar, right?
Close.
It's pretty similar.
It was a good list.
Correct that.
Shauna's defense, it's been a very long day.
It's been a long day.
We were all day at TCAT, so yeah.
Forgive her. Sorry about that. So anyway, thank you all for volunteering for the liaison positions. In other news, we are going to meet March 20th at 1:20, and Mental Health Association is going to come in and talk to us about what they have done with some of the funding that we provided in last year's budget. We're also going to be joined by Frank Krupa, who's going to talk about the overdoses here in Tompkins County. Did I forget anything? Okay, thank you.
Questions or comments for Shauna? Okay, thank you, Shauna. Housing and Economic Development Committee, Greg Mezzi, Chair.
Thank you, Dan. Our meeting is tomorrow, Wednesday, March 6th at 3 p.m. here in the Legislature chambers. We will be finalizing and confirming our liaison assignments. We will also be looking at a couple of the NYSAC resolutions that I addressed earlier in legislative privilege of the floor. We'll have a brief discussion about the New York State Housing Summit that members of our planning department and some legislators attended in Albany a few weeks back. We'll get an update from Ithaca Area Economic Development and a few other housekeeping things, with also a continuum of care update as it relates to homelessness and the unhoused, and some updates from the workforce development folks. So should be a good agenda with lots to discuss, and if there's any questions, happy to take those now. I do want to mention that the governor's representative did come for a Chamber of Commerce state of the budget, the sort of governor's roadshow that they take to different communities. Had the opportunity to sit in that. There was many people, including folks from our staff, other legislators were in attendance, and overall it was good to see the governor's staff engaging with the community and sort of sharing the budget news, which hopefully we will not see major cost shifts to the county like we have in years past, but we still probably could see some. The key word there was major that they used. But always cost shifts as we know how that program goes. But it was good to have that event. So that concludes my report.
Questions or comments for Greg? Greg, I had a small question. You mentioned the Housing Summit in Albany a few weeks ago. Did you say some legislators went?
Yeah. You went, right? Yeah. Yeah, sorry, Veronica went.
Veronica, you did. Okay. I want to talk to you afterwards.
Yeah, I believe you were the only legislator that went to the Housing Summit, correct?
From this legislature,
From this, yeah. There was members from the city, there was planning department staff, and other folks. So there was a Tompkins County contingent that went. So Megan and Veronica will give a little update at HED.
Thank you. All right. Next up, Facilities and Infrastructure Committee, Lee Shirtliff, Chair.
Facilities and Infrastructure has not met since the last meeting. The next meeting of the committee will be on Thursday, the 21st. And we had one resolution that was on the consent agenda that's been pulled, Resolution B, authorization for a mural on the Human Services Annex, Tompkins County Whole Health, ID number 12185. So moved.
Somebody want to second that? Amanda Champion seconds. Do you want to say anything about it, Lee, or do you want to just go right to Mike?
I would go to the person that pulled it and see if there's a question or comment.
Mr. Sigler, you're on.
No, it's not really a comment. I mean, I've sent you my reasons as to why I pulled it, but I'll relate those here, and I'll try to do it quickly. It just doesn't sit right with me. I understand that we maybe want to recognize our county's reaction to COVID-19. I mean, certainly I think our county pulled together and we did the best we could with the information we had at hand. And I'll say that about Cornell too. Cornell was held up as a model, I think, of how it reacted and the testing facilities that we got into place and the testing for COVID-19 is certainly something to be recognized. But my problem is, I think in part, COVID-19 has not gone away. We still have 1,500 people apparently a week dying from this disease. We can hold up and say this vaccine is terrific, but the problem I think remains. A lot of people don't think it's terrific. 19.4% is the number of the amount of people who are getting the vaccine right now. That's 18 years and older. The part I found surprising was and this is from the CDC, I actually looked this up for this, 38% of people over the age of 65 are getting the vaccine. And we can argue that, better marketing, we're not marketing it correctly. It just seems like a lot of people don't trust the vaccines that are available, and perhaps the pharmaceutical companies should take note of that and develop a vaccine that more people would be comfortable with. Just my 2 cents on that issue. I also don't think at this point that the nation's done a reckoning of some of the actions that were taken, and I would like to see a reckoning because I think eventually we'll be hit with a pandemic again. I would like to know what worked, what did not work. Are masks effective? Are they not effective? How effective are they? Things along those lines that I think we haven't actually addressed yet. Eventually, maybe we will have a vaccine that will be as accepted as the flu vaccine is, but that is not today. So, and again, this I just think was a difficult time for people. I don't know if we would be putting up a mural. I don't know what the mural is going to look like, obviously, but I mean, if we had the Spanish flu come through again, I don't know if we'd be painting up a mural to recognize that. So those are my 2 cents on it, and that's why I'd be voting against it. But I mean, I understand why other people might want to do it. Thank you very much.
Rich?
Yeah, I will vote in support of the resolution. One is just historically, if you look at pandemics of the past, it takes about 5 years. So you're right, we're still in it. But the overall response that our country made, we made a lot of mistakes, but we did a pretty good job. We saved a lot of lives. And I got COVID a few weeks ago, and it's pretty manageable at this point for a reasonably healthy person. Because of the amazing work of lots and lots of very smart people. But I also think back to walking from my house down to State Street to watch the buses go from Cugin Medical Center, taking medical professionals down to New York City in the heart of the panic, and the bravery of the people that said, no, we have to go help. I think that does deserve some recognition. That was a really scary time. And of course, we're still paying for it. And, you look at where the impacts are in our schools, in our older population, we have to keep paying attention to it. I think the mural might help us do that and think about the things we did right and the things we did wrong. So I also understand the committee is going to get a draft to look at of the proposal. So if there's something major that we would be concerned with, I certainly want to give due deference to the artist, but it is a public mural, so we'll get a chance to look at it. I think it's okay. Thanks.
Any other debate? Ann Corman.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention you talked about the stats for the vaccine, for the COVID vaccine, and so I believe, I just looked it up, I believe that's for the most recent booster. Although they're calling it the vaccine, like you get the yearly flu vaccine, as you said. And I also would like to see people get it. When I got my last flu shot, I also got the last COVID shot. So hopefully people will get it on a regular basis. Overall, the CDC is saying that 81% have gotten the COVID vaccination. So that's a pretty high rate, but right. So I just want to put a plug out there for folks to think about getting the updated COVID shots yearly, just like you do the flu shot. But still, with the flu shot, only 50% of people get that. But 50% is better than 20-something%. So thank you.
Craig.
Yeah, I necessarily didn't want to speak to this, but I do think that there's something about public art that should be provocative and engaging and spark conversation and spark some of the what worked, what didn't work. Art, right? It's an artist's interpretation of a snapshot in time, a feeling, an emotion, something like that. I hope as a legislature we don't, to some of Rich's comments, we don't over-censor that art and we let the artists do what they do. Obviously, if there's something highly objectionable, obviously we have an obligation to say that. But I do think that these type of things don't have to be politicized. They don't have to be one side or the other. They don't have to be about how this group thinks or that group thinks. It can be about what the artist wants to capture as it relates to that topic. And hopefully there's dialogue around that, right? What worked, what didn't work. So I don't see how not supporting this does any good. I see supporting this as sparking that dialogue so that we can have greater conversation around what would we do next time? What did work well, right? The bravery we have within our community to send people down to New York City. Some of the science that some may not understand, others may understand better. I think art gives a space for us to engage in that dialogue that's not politicized. And unfortunately, this topic has been highly politicized, and I think art is the appropriate space after science to have this conversation. And so I fully support this, fully support public art. I think there's an opportunity for it to provoke feelings and provoke conversation. And that's part of the goal. Because unless we have those conversations in a space that allows for that conversation to be done safely, we're never going to get, Mike, to the things that I think you're looking at, which is what worked, what didn't work. but by squashing what actually did happen in the past, it doesn't do really any good at all.
Who would like to respond?
I understand what you're saying, as I said at the beginning, that I do understand what you're saying. I just think that people had very different experiences. I know people who had their businesses closed, and they are now in completely different jobs and not the jobs they may prefer to do. I know a lot of children that have been set back 2 years and have not recovered. So while I appreciate what you're saying, this will be one person's interpretation of their experience and their lived experience. And their lived experience may not incorporate what everyone else's lived experience was. So that is the challenge of public art. And yes, you're right, we're going to see it. But I agree with you too that should we really be censoring someone's vision? I don't necessarily think that we should be doing that. And that's the challenge. So, there you go.
Any further debate?
Don't you already?
Okay, we're ready to vote on Resolution B, authorization for mural on the Human Services Annex. All in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed? That is 13-1, the resolution passes. Lee, did you have anything further from your committee?
Not tonight, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Government Operations Committee, Amanda Champion, Chair.
Great, thank you. We are meeting on Thursday, this coming Thursday at 10 a.m. We have lots on the agenda, including updates from our assessment department. We are going to also hear from the History Center. Well, not really hear from them. We're going to talk amongst ourselves and with them. It's been brought up that we might want to have some History Center artifacts or pictures or maps or paintings or whatnot in more places in county buildings. So we're going to talk about that and what that could look like. A couple of resolutions, budget adjustments. We are going to also hear from administration on department goals. We'll talk about our committee goals for the year, which I have a big, long list because everyone keeps sending me things saying this belongs in GO. And we will bring up the discussion again about the resolution, the order of succession in the absence of the chair and vice chair. So we will talk about that again. So that's what's going to happen on Thursday. I think it's going to be a good long meeting. I did want to just remind everyone that you got an email from Katrina reminding you to fill out your financial disclosure forms, or form. It's an online form. Any conflict of interest, we have to do this every year. So please check your email. If you didn't get that, let Katrina know. You have until May. So that's lots of time, but you might as well just get it done now. Don't wait. And that's all I've got.
Questions or comments for Amanda? Okay, thank you, Amanda. Planning, Energy, and Environmental Quality Committee, Ann Corman, Chair.
Thank you, Dan. We are meeting on Monday, March 11th at 10 a.m. here. And I want to thank our Vice Chair, Dr. Veronica Pillar, for facilitating the last two meetings while I attended remotely. So I really appreciate that and did a great job. And so for the next meeting, one of the things we'll be discussing is, if folks can bring their calendars who are in the committee, we're going to talk about rescheduling the April 8th meeting because that's a solar eclipse. So I know there's at least, I'm serious, a lot of people want to go to it, and you have to take, it's at least a 2 or 3 hour
drive north,
maybe ride. So a lot of folks, or at least several of us, are interested in doing that. So bring your calendar for that.
The next eclipse isn't until 2044, so.
Right, so I think it's worth considering changing the one peak meeting for it. And I don't know, maybe it would come under GO if it's a county holiday or not, but you can add it to your goals for the year. We're also going to talk about a Skip the Stuff initiative update. We have a resolution forwarded to us from the CASE Board, the Climate and Sustainable Energy Board, and it's a resolution to support New York State budget proposals and litigation to address climate change. This is similar to one that we passed last year, but as folks talked about at NYSAC, there's a timeliness to and urgency to getting certain things passed and getting the money and the enforcement for the state to help us address climate change are, I believe, is a timely issue. So we'll be discussing that resolution. We also have a resolution for accepting the Tompkins County Building Code Administration and Operations Study. So that's something that was presented previously at one of our meetings. And there is a summary in the packet to refresh your memory, and we'll be voting on accepting that. And if you want any details, like I said, that's in our budget packet, or I'm sorry, our committee packet. We will also have a presentation from the Department of Recycling and Materials Management on their department goals. And also, we will talk about their solid waste management plan. They have given us the input that they received from the community and their responses to that. And it's a little bit lengthy, but I think it's a good read because it really delves into what the community is wanting and some of our responses to that. So I think it's worth a read for everybody. And then last, we have a resolution for authorizing a contract with our soil and water conservation, with the Tompkins County Soil and Water Conservation District to provide them interim financial assistance, and this is something that we've been doing each year to help them through a gap until their funding comes in. And I think that's it, unless I'm missing something, Veronica?
I think that's it, but I do want to jump in since you mentioned the case board resolution to come back and answer Deborah's question from earlier. The packaging producer responsibility bill is, as written, designed to put the cost of packaging materials back on the producers, and it's got a list of 17 different materials plus any mixture of those materials for which fees can be figured out and charged to the producer, as well as lots and lots of how that should be determined and how a council and an organization should be determined to administer it.
Thank you. And lastly, I'll just say if anybody attended NYSAC and if there's anything else they want to add that they didn't add today that's pertinent to our committee, we'll have time for that. Thank you.
Questions or comments for Ann? Thank you, Ann. The Community Recovery Fund Advisory Committee will next meet on March 25th, 10:30. Questions?
Is that daylight savings time?
Ooh, trick question. Budget, Capital, and Personnel Committee, Mike Lane, Chair.
We'll next meet on March 14th at 9 o'clock. One of the things the Budget Committee needs to do is keep us always thinking about how things can come up unexpectedly that cost us a lot of money. And I read in the newspaper today, for example, that Excelis Blue Cross Blue Shield, based in Rochester, just suffered a $28 million loss. And it's the first time that they've had a loss since 2008 or 2009, I forgot which of the years, when it was $58 million. That was back in the Great Recession. How that's going to filter down through our consortium to us, I'm not sure, but I don't think it's going to lower our costs. Those are the kinds of things that come up. And we all know our wonderful delegation has come back and reported from NYSAC. I think it's true that no one is safe while the New York State Legislature is in session. And certainly not counties. And someone mentioned about the last 2 days when things will pop up. We saw that last year. We need help for our community college. We need help for our Medicaid hit that we got last year, and it's going to hit us again this year, and so many other things. And fortunately, right now we're pretty strong financially, but if we aren't careful, and we know every department's going to want more people, it's what we can afford and what we need to do to serve our people the best we can. So just a little lecture. I'm learning from Deborah.
Oh, God. You give me too much credit, Mike.
Any questions or comments? Mike Lane, Budget Committee. Okay, thank you, Mike. Workforce, Diversity and Inclusion Committee, Veronica Pillar, Chair.
Thank you, Dan. WDIC met last Wednesday at 3 p.m. We mainly discussed committee goals for the year again, and have a whole long list that you can check out. But some of the focus of discussion was about how WDIC can act as sort of maybe a hub or platform for diversity, equity, and inclusion accountability throughout our organization, in partnership with work being done with the strategic plan and with our chief equity and diversity officers, the framework development. We talked as well about making better use of data that we already have about employee diversity and other things that hasn't been presented to us in quite some time, and so we're going to try to get back on track with that. And also talked about plugging into the website redevelopment for the whole county that is coming a lot. I think a lot of work is happening behind the scenes, or maybe Gio's hearing about it, I don't know. But we'll be seeing how we can use that to advance our goals as well. And our next meeting is March 27th at 3 p.m.
Questions or comments for Veronica?
Oh, and I should have invited Travis if you have anything to add.
Okay, thank you. Public Safety Committee, Rich John, Chair.
Thank you, Dan. The Public Safety Committee met last Thursday, February 29th. We had a presentation from the Sunflower House, which is a re-entry facility or townhouses that work very hard to provide initial housing and supportive services to people coming out of jail, prison, and recovery. And it was a good report. They seem to be doing some very good stuff with people in program. And one of the metrics they use is recidivism, whether these people are getting into further trouble, after they go through the Sunflower House program. And in program, while they're in Sunflower House, the recidivism rate has been very low, like 7%, and that's great. What they're finding, though, is that when they exit Sunflower House, it's not nearly that good. And in fact, it's approaching what the sort of background radiation for recidivism is in the community. So we had a good discussion about that, and the upshot, I think, is that you probably need to lengthen the services. And in fact, the research seems to be going that if you really want to be successful in re-entering people from jail, prison, and who are recovering from drug or alcohol addiction, it's a long-term process. And I think the lesson I took from that is that as a legislature, we probably need to think about something far more comprehensive. Beyond the good work that they're doing at Sunflower House, if we really want to turn people's lives in a better direction on a consistent, good percentage, we need to do more. And, Shauna, you were talking about overdoses earlier. Yeah, the numbers we keep seeing are so discouraging. But again, they're doing very good work there. They're working with one of the populations that are some of the hardest people to help. And it was a very positive report from that standpoint. They are probably going to be coming looking for more money from us in our budget, just so you know. As they explained, it's far more expensive to run Sunflower House than they initially anticipated. A lot of that is because the people that are there are barred from getting a lot of the public assistance that they thought they would be able to get. So we may need to just think more creatively about that and think about what are the barriers to services. But it was a good presentation. We also had a presentation from county administration for the department goals of the different department heads that report to public safety. We were going to have a discussion about committee goals, but we ran out of time. So I anticipate we will do that at our March meeting, which will happen on March 26th, Tuesday at 1 o'clock. The only other thing I'd mention is our jail numbers are a little lower. We're at 58 and 0 board outs. So that number has come down a little bit. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Deborah.
So do you think, or did they opine, that the backslide in the recidivism rate after people leave the program is attributable to the lack of services or the absence of a controlled environment?
I would say both, but Veronica, maybe you have an opinion on that.
I was not fully paying attention because I was gonna say something else that's related, which is they presented a lot of numbers on recidivism and such, but also cautioned us that the numbers they presented were like apples and oranges and bananas and not all. It was like recidivism rates measured not necessarily with the same methodology and not on the same population of people. Obviously not the same individuals, like some people went through Sunflower House and some not, but also that I think like our DA pointed out that the people going through the Sunflower House program tend to be some of the most like high needs, high trauma, most likely to recidivate, I guess, people compared to, I guess, the background population who have been incarcerated in Tompkins County. If that sounds right. So
no, that's true. And it's a fairly small data set. There's 42 people total. So, you have to be careful with the numbers, but it does seem like while in program, they were doing pretty well. And that would speak to the issue you just raised is it's probably housing, immediate available housing for these people. But you can't separate that out from all of the supportive services that you really have to supply. If it's just housing, doesn't seem to do it.
Okay, thank you.
Veronica, did you have more that you wanted to say?
I guess I wanted to add, a takeaway I had from this is that I think, like Rich is saying, you just need so many services and a whole network community of them to really support people. And so Sunflower House, they can't do it alone, of course, but they've gotten some traction, and I think that's really valuable. Also a note on the budget request, I think, yes, agreed with what Rich said about the costs are higher than they expected, but also just to remind people the Sunflower Houses were a 3-year OTR, and this is year 3 of it. So even if costs weren't increasing, this is the time that they would come to ask for money again.
Ann.
I just wanted to mention quickly that my experience with Sunflower Houses, they're an agency that really is trying to figure out the services to meet that individual, not that individual to fit in what they offer. And I think we all know that that's the type of services that we really need in this community, to be flexible. And also, they are an organization that is tracking so many different variables. And if they weren't doing this, we wouldn't really have this information of what's working and what's not. And I believe they're one of the few organizations that are tracking in such detail of what services they're providing, the recidivism, and all the other details of, people continuing with work and all kinds of things. So even though we're hearing these numbers, I'd rather have that data than not have it and just continuing to fund something. So I'm glad that they're looking at how do they adjust their services to help their clients.
Yeah, this is, Ann, you're absolutely right. This is a learning opportunity where we do have a lot to learn. And this experiment is playing out across our country, and we can learn from other communities, but I'm very happy that we're trying something here. And I think, I'm pretty confident it'll get better. We will learn and we'll improve it.
I'll just mention that part of what we paid for with that over-target request was for a data analyst to do this. So I have Shauna, then Travis.
I definitely think that there's a need for the houses here in our community. And, my assumption too is that these are some of the hardest people to house in our county. Some of them are sanctioned, some of them have felonies, some of them cannot be housed with other people. And so this might actually be financially the most feasible way to house them, despite it's going to be a lot of money. With that said, I actually very specifically remember as we were going through the budget and deciding whether we were going to fund them or not, one of the conversations, and it was Deborah and it was Rich, that said, this does not need to be a new program after 3 years that the county needs to fund. And we all agreed that we would fund them for 3 years, but they were very well aware that they needed to provide their funding and look for grant funding. So I hope that's been in the background, and I do hope that it's not just assumed that they're going to come to the county and get all of their funding, because we made it very clear from day one that probably shouldn't happen.
Certainly, I think they're aware that they don't just ask and get. Fortunately, I would say there's some real opportunity in grants coming out in specifically this area. In fact, Bridget, you shared some information on some grant opportunities. I think it's April 18th or something. It's a pretty close due date, but that would be directly on point with this. But if we can get help with paying for it. 3 years ago is 3 years ago. At this point, I guess I'm sitting here saying, do we want to lose this? Do we want to stop funding it and net benefit? I'm thinking this is something we want to look very closely at before we cut it loose. But I'm one of 14, so we'll have to make that hard choice.
Travis.
So one of the things to keep in mind with a program like this is understanding expectations. When you go into it, you have these high expectations, and as you get into it, you start to understand what this really looks like. We're talking about the folks who end up going back, but we're not talking about the folks who don't, and the changes in their lives, and how that also affects the rest of the community. So when you have programs like that and others in this community that help people with their needs, that meet people where they are, that help them with their challenges, those folks who may never experience the type of success that we think they should are experiencing some type of success for themselves, which has an effect on the rest of the community. It has an effect on everybody else's quality of life. So I know we have the recidivism rate, but we also have the success rate. And somebody who may go back may not go back the second time when they come home. So it's hard to look at those numbers and say this isn't working because some people are not successful in this program. They may have experienced some successes while they were here. Addiction, I don't have to say this to y'all, you know enough about addiction. It's not a temporary thing, it's a lifelong issue. And so I think that focusing on folks who are successful in these programs and hearing success stories is very helpful, Because I know, like, even with LEAD, we had somebody OD the other day, somebody who was like one of the original people in the program. But her quality of life from the time she got into the program had changed tremendously. And, you know, sometimes that's what you do. You're just trying to give somebody something for a period of time. So look at the other side of those numbers. Look at the success rate that the success that people are having.
Yeah, certainly when you say 7% recidivism rate, you're saying 93% aren't rearrested while they're in program. You know, again, you know, once they're out of program, it starts to fade, but it shows you can make a difference. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Oh, Deborah, sorry.
Yeah, so I guess I'm here to be the Grinch. You know, we spent a not insubstantial amount of time at the beginning of this meeting hearing from concerned constituents and discussing the issue of the fact that, you know, the property tax keeps going up, and eventually people are not going to be able to afford to live here. I just want to remind you all, there's a direct line between that problem and all of the requests that we get and have to weigh and balance when we decide how to distribute our funding. It would be lovely if we could afford to fund all of these programs. But if we do that, then those taxes are going to keep going up. So, you know, all I can say is, don't forget that connection between what it's costing people to live here and the affordability of housing for everyone and our decisions about what to fund and what not to fund.
Greg.
Yeah, Deborah, that's an excellent point. I also think it's important too that when we look at the budget, we're just not adding, but maybe in our budget process, there's some editing that needs to take place, and maybe there's some reduction. And that's where I would challenge county administration and department heads, speaking solely as myself as a legislator, not on behalf of the legislature, but are there areas where we have waste and excess that we can truly balance a budget rather than just keep piling on? Are there opportunities to look at reductions or programs that are ineffective or mandates that no longer exist? So I think one of the things that we're challenged with is we constantly look at addition. Rarely do we sit around this table and look at subtraction. Rarely do we look at really editing and challenging the assumptions in a budget. And I think this year, more than ever, I hope we're able to do that rather than just look at what we're adding, also have a robust conversation about what we're reducing. Because then we can add some of these things that may benefit our community at a much greater rate than some of the other government inefficiencies that we may have that are not benefiting the community at the rate which maybe another program might.
Fair enough.
Not saying that those exist. It's not a criticism or critique, but I think it's any healthy organization undergoes these type of activities. And I think we really need to dig a little bit deeper into our financials and get into some of the nitty gritty to see where we can find some money to fund worthwhile programs.
Veronica.
Thanks. I wanted to respond to Deborah's comment, though also I agree with Greg, but I think it's hard to find things to subtract when it's hard to actually see what's in the budget. And this might be a software limitation thing like I spoke about earlier, but we get the details on the over target requests. We don't tend to get the details on just the target. So if we want to subtract, maybe there's some admin, I don't mean admin department, I mean administrative, not policy level,
Well,
change to be done there.
When we see the number of full-time employees and program costs and stuff like that, maybe we should be digging deeper.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm saying. Like, I have seen a line program expense and a large number.
Yeah.
I don't know how to find out what that means. But about the, like, paying for programs, making people's taxes go up, yes, I have that connection in mind. I also think something that actually you, Deborah, bring up is that a lot of what taxes or what our budget is paying for is unfunded state mandates or otherwise like required things. And some of that is social service payments to like barely support people who might otherwise be supported through programs. That something like, we're not debating the sunflower houses now, but.
That's right. We're in the Public Safety Committee report, just so everyone remember.
Yeah. But like, that is a program that is trying to make it more, trying to make it so people can live in Tompkins County instead of not being able to, a certain subset of people, that they're housed instead of not. So if we say, I don't think I question the saying, oh, maybe we shouldn't pay for the program that allows people to live here because it's going to make it harder for people to live here. Like, that's worth saying, but it's a bit circular. And then if you think about what happens to someone who's, say, not living in, for instance, the sunflower houses, whatever it is, it's probably not going to be free to the county. It's not free to us for people to be in jail. It's not free for people to need emergency medical care because they couldn't like have their basic needs met. I don't think it's free to deal with people overdosing, whether they survive or not, on top of the like the cost in non-financial ways. So I wish we had a way to like attach a number to all those other costs and then we could see it. I don't know how to do that, but I think they're there and I think those connections matter too.
Lee.
I'm sorry I didn't bring my notes from the Public Safety Committee meeting, but it's an illustrative conversation because as we move into the budget process, I'm looking for that greater context. And I think where we were at with that report was that they had intended on spending $100,000 a year for 3 years. It's turned out to be expenses in the area of $180,000 a year. It's drained OAR's reserves in order to make the program move forward. My question at that point was, we saw the success rates or non-success rates. The one thing that I had hoped for or hope that we will see is the actual quantifying of how many people were in the program and how many people in true numbers were a success. And if we spent $180,000 and X number of people found their way into stable housing, then that's a value in the budgetary context that it saved us somewhere else. But those are true numbers that I'm looking for, not just there, but in other programs that we evaluate. Tell me how many people we were able to put on the path to a stable life. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments about the Public Safety Committee report? Okay. Rich, did you want to say something to conclude?
You know, it just calls back several years ago when we were looking at our jail population. I learned about somebody I went to high school with who, after graduating high school, struggled with drugs and alcohol ever since. And this person has been in our jail a few years ago, 81 entries. And it's probably more. I just heard a recent story about this person. And you think about that and you go, well, that's a wasted life. You know, it's really, really sad. And it is. But you also think about the economic consequence to the county in 81 times of putting somebody in the jail and holding them there. There's this invisible cost that Veronica's talking about. If you don't break that cycle And breaking the cycle is really hard, and it often doesn't work, and maybe it would have never worked for this person. But when I was starting out in legal practice here in Ithaca, there really wasn't anything. You know, there just wasn't any programming at all. And maybe if there had been, maybe if this person had gotten help early on, it would have helped him, but it also would have helped us. A dramatic, I forget how many bed days he was in our jail, has been in our jail. You know, Deborah, I agree with you completely. We have to be really stingy this budget cycle. But we also have to look at this, you know, opportunity cost of getting somebody away from being a cost center to a profitable member of society, if it's possible.
Okay, we are going to, sorry, that's okay. We are going to continue on the agenda. We don't have any individual member filed resolutions. Will somebody like to move the minutes of the previous meeting, February 20th? Travis moves, Randy seconds. Discussion, Mike Sigler.
Well, it's not really discussion. I'll let you get through that, and then I have a question.
Okay, any discussion about the minutes? Let's have a vote then. All in favor? Any opposed? That's 14-0, passes, thank you. Mike Sigler, go ahead.
Did you touch on this at the top of the meeting or the visit we had yesterday?
No.
Okay, would you like to? Because it was interesting.
I don't actually. Do you want to? You're welcome to.
I thought you would. Okay, Chuck Schumer was here yesterday up at the hospital. And it's actually a pretty interesting story. There's been a cyberware attack on a lot of local hospitals. And ours is one of them. And Schumer was here to say that he's going to try to get money to forward them some of the bills because they cannot send any billing out right now because of this cyber attack. And it was just really interesting. And the majority leader is in your town.
So I believe there was no cyber attack on our hospital.
Right.
Well, it was on the billing system.
It was on an insurance system in another state. Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
That's a big difference.
Just whatever. Just you're right though. It impacts our hospital.
Okay, on the billing system that our hospital uses. How about that?
Right.
There you go.
All right. Any unfinished business? Okay, we need to go into executive session for the purpose of the proposed acquisition, sale, or lease of real property, or the proposed acquisition of securities, or sale or exchange of securities held by such public body, but only when publicity would substantially affect the value thereof. Is there somebody that would move that we go into executive session? Mike moves, Travis seconds. Have a vote. All to executive session. Any opposed? That is unanimous. We will take a few minutes break to switch over. And I don't believe we will take any action when we come out of executive session.
Busy with TCAT.